irresponsible to put yourself in a position where you're not spraying things on a commercial scale? Yes.
Well, and I think part of that is because there is no established guidelines. If 100%. We had established guidelines, it would be different. The fact that we don't means we're more or less forced into that prevention aspect of it, right? Because with the true IPM program, and again, you know, cannabis is unique in that it's a high-end horticultural product that we do ingest and we smoke, right? So, and we're oil farmers, so it's a little bit different than anything else.
The problem is,
we're Jug Dealers. We're the podcast you need in your feed. Teaching the game like you never seen. Jared, Gabe, Rambo, true OGs. Masters of the globe, set your mind free. From Denver, Colorado, where the data's green. We set the data points for the SOPs. Jug Dealers Podcast, yes indeed.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Jug Dealers Podcast, where we discuss all things cannabis and lifestyle related, brought to you by the good people at 5-8. And now we have jugdealers.net for all your needs. So feel free to reach out with comments, questions, or just buy something cool. We appreciate anything.
All of these products you see behind us are available, including the merchandise that you see us wearing as well. Shirts, hats, things like that, all available. If you want to support us, go ahead and hit jugdealers.shop. We are not supported. We're all self-funded here at the Jug Den.
This is a family enterprise. Well, today we got a super exciting episode. We're going to continue on with our series that we've kind of been going through as far as IPM, bugs. You know, last time we talked about entomology. Know why. And
talking about, the classes of Insecta, the class of Insecta and all the different orders within the class of Insecta. Yep. Don't get it twisted there, folks.
So today we wanted to go a little deeper down the hole into cannabis specific pests. We're going to give a little shout out at first. If you are dealing with any cannabis specific pests, notably the russet or the spider mite, we have the thing for you, our russet made
and the multi
by Scietetics. And this is going to be a 10 to 30 mil a gallon usage. It's effective on russets. It's effective on spider mites. Obviously, I would say don't use it as a standalone. Use it in your regiment of things that you use, but it's one of the arrows. Another tool. Another arrow in the quiver. So, with no further ado, let's hop into some cannabis specific pests today.
And in the last one too, we kind of ended up with a lot of the horticultural pests.
It was more general,
very general. Of which, many of which we don't have problems with indoor specifically. Right,
but a lot of them we do. So,
but a lot of them we do.
And honestly, the big thing with us is, we like to teach. We like to learn a little bit. This is all stuff that we've kind of dealt with for years. And even for us, even if we've dealt with it, you went through these classes in college. It's still good to get a refresher.
Oh my goodness, absolutely.
I think even if you have done whatever you've done, it's always good to read things and get refreshers and kind of, as you like to point out a lot. We know very little about plants, which means they're still discovering things.
Many things. Yes.
So
many things.
It's good to just continue to kind of dive down the rabbit hole, because there are maybe, for you to think that you know everything about anything, purely shows your ignorance.
Well, once you stop learning, you start dying, folks. So let's get into it. We wanted to get in again. We talked about just insects and bugs, and of course, bugs is not the true term, right? Because it is insects. Because if we're talking bugs, it would only be Hemiptera, right?
Yep.
Which are the true bugs. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, tune into last episode, get caught up. From now, we're going to go right into the cannabis specific pests. And we had right at the end of the episode talked about, because we went through all these different things, and I knew that people were going to say, what the hell about spider mites?
We left them with spiders and russets, and they're not insects.
They're not insects. They're arachnids, right? Because they have 8 legs.
Yep.
Is one of the defining features. Yep. All insects having, as we all know from last episode, 6 legs. So the aforementioned mites, such as spider, broad, and russet mites, which are of the class Arachnida, and these are all, again, cannabis-specific pests. Ants, believe it or not, class Insecta. I want to say all the rest of these are, but I wanted to go ahead and split it up just in case there were any others that weren't. Aphids, including those damnable root aphids.
The worst.
Class Insecta. Caterpillars, such as cutworms, cabbage worms, leaf eaters, corn borers, Class Insecta.
And that's not going to be one you see inside, but I definitely have seen them outside.
Definitely have seen them outside.
If you've dealt with some of the outdoor cannabis gardens, especially West Coast, East Coast. I'll be honest with you. I have not seen the problems here in Colorado when I've grown outdoors as far as caterpillars.
I can believe that.
Quite as much. I have had a couple, but on the East and West Coast.
You know where I actually got a lot of caterpillar damage this year? A slight aside. This kind of goes back to our veggie gardening episode, but dude, my leaf lettuce, they were just savage. Hammering it. I mean, it was beautiful, and I kind of do the multiple cuts on it. Anyway,
the timing is the worst with those things.
Yeah.
Too,
I think it's all slimy, bro. I got in there was all that frass. It was like all just this really goopy. Okay. Anyway, let's not get stuck up on that. Fungus gnats, annoying. Not the worst damagers, but definitely annoying. Class Insecta as well. The leaf miners, again, mostly outdoors, almost exclusively outdoors. You know where they get bad? Speaking of veggies again. My spinach. They really take a loving to my spinach.
Love that chlorophyll.
If you can get in there actually, and you can rip it open and actually get the little bastard out of there. Showed my kids that. They actually were grossed out and also fascinated at the same time. Mealy bugs and scale. Class Insecta, again, mostly outside. The thrips, the god-awful thrips that we actually realized that both of us learned was number one pest.
Never used to, and it's funny for us because it never used to be a problem if you ever grew cannabis in the 90s and early 2000s. The only thing we ever really dealt with was spider mites, at least here in Colorado. Here in Colorado.
And that was because of the hot,
I'm not going to speak to other places, but here in Colorado, it was mainly the spider mite. You didn't have thrips. You didn't have powdery mildew.
No.
You didn't really have aphids. I don't remember seeing any of those problems.
No. And then, of course, last but certainly not least, the whiteflies. Again, more annoying than anything else. But I believe the whiteflies can be pretty bad vectors of disease, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
So that's almost where you're going to get more damage for them, is them vectoring plant disease. Vector meaning they're moving it from plant species to plant species. They go on one plant, they'll get their little mouth sucker piercing whatever mouth parts in there, and then they fly to the next one. So all of this is actually taken from the Marijuana Garden Saver, which we have talked about before, but I want to go ahead and bring it out again. And again, that book, and we'll talk about it a little more specifically in the book section, but insects is only one part of it. Now, an interesting omission out of that book was actually the spider mites and russet mites and broad mites, et cetera. I do believe they have an updated version. The original, as we checked, was 2008. So I do think that they've updated it into, now that hemp russet mites actually got identified, et cetera, et cetera. So, but I wanted to just kind of give you a little bit of a source of where I got that. So let's talk about IPM. This actually is going to start a fairly interesting conversation that we actually started having before we hit record. And we said, all right, let's just stop this and have it on camera. I wanted to talk about IPM. Now, first off, we have done an entire episode on it. I'd encourage you to look back at it. We did it in mid-January, and we did the whole episode on nothing but the topic of IPM, which is integrated pest management.
So this is by definition. Let's get by definition.
And so integrated pest management by definition. And the reason that we're making this point is because of what we'll get into here in a second. One of the main goals is chemical control as a last result, right? So you don't have any chemical prevention, but let's give the actual university definition of it. And then we'll kind of beat that up a little bit, or Gabe would like to dissect a little bit, which I think is worth doing. IPM is an ecosystem-based strategy. I think that's incredibly important to see. So yeah, it's an eco-based system. So it is.
When we talk about the pyramid,
right?
Environment.
It's all of it, right?
And that's what creates that ecosystem.
Yep. So. The focus is on long-term prevention of pests or their damage through a combination, and I think that's another part that's very important, the combo of techniques such as biological control, habitat manipulation, modification of cultural practices, and the use of resistant varieties. Pesticides are used only after monitoring indicates that they are needed according to established guidelines, and treatments are made with the goal of removing only the target organism. Pest control materials are selected and applied in a manner that minimizes risk to human health, beneficial and non-target organisms, and the environment. So before I let Gabe rip this apart, which he wants to, and this is, keep this in mind, this is from a horticultural standpoint, not necessarily a cannabis standpoint. So like the little cards we were talking about earlier, and the fact that the yellow and the blue cards have little squares on that, those are the populations that people are looking at. So if you were to get into like the Vegetable Growers Handbook, the Knott's Vegetables Growers Handbook, you're going to see, okay, this population is deemed not enough pressure to actually apply pesticides to. In the cannabis world, where none of those standards have been set, even to the point of some of them are ridiculous. Like isn't Michigan have like a 0 microbial level or something like that, which is like not even real.
I want to say it's probably
it's probably
super low. 1,000.
Right.
And just to put it in perspective for people, like when you're talking about, so they have two things they test for. They test for yeast and mold, and then they test for anaerobic bacteria. There's usually in any state when it comes to cannabis, I can't remember, it's 17 panel. They're testing for heavy metals.
Right.
They're testing for all these different things.
Sure.
But when you talk about lettuce, when you talk about common vegetables that people eat, broccoli, you're allowed 50,000 CFU. That's colony forming units.
Right.
But that's any of the things you see for vegetables are not near as stringent as what they do for cannabis.
Or probably even tobacco for that matter, right? Because let's even talk about it as a smokable product. So first off, you're already anything that would be smokable. My guess is they're going to look at that a little bit differently, the biologicals that are allowed, right?
Yep.
And then beyond that, cannabis gets almost unfairly.
Yeah. And the thing is,
targeted.
when we talk about this, like, we're not just talking about pests. We're talking about pathogens. We're talking about all these other things that, I'll be honest with you, man, some of my last grows in Maryland, I had Girl Scout cookies forum cut failing for yeast and mold.
Right.
And like, visibly looking at that plant, those purples, they don't really mold that much. The buds are small. I mean, you could not visibly find a piece of mold on this plant.
Yeah, it was failing.
And yet it was failing. And so when we talk about these things, and that's why when you and I were going over this and it says pesticides are used only after monitoring indicates they are needed according to established guidelines. Let me tell you something. If I have to fail a Girl Scout cookies to decide that I need to be spraying it with Zerotol, because we're not just talking about the pesticides. We're talking about things like Zerotol. We're talking about any one of these things we're going to spray. Do
you want to wait for a fail?
Do I want to spray things? No. Is it irresponsible to put yourself in a position where you're not spraying things on a commercial scale? Yes.
Well, and I think part of that is because there is no established guidelines. If 100%. We had established guidelines, it would be different. The fact that we don't means we're more or less forced into that prevention aspect of it, right? Because with the true IPM program, and again, cannabis is unique in that it's a high-end horticultural product that we do ingest and we smoke, right? So, and we're oil farmers. So it's a little bit different than anything else.
The problem is, if you go to any other industry, there's federal guidelines.
Correct.
And when you use, I would encourage anybody, not only because it's the law, but because it's responsible. But when you use any pesticide whatsoever, it does not matter if you use this pesticide every single day.
You're still supposed to read it.
Every time you pick it up, you are required to read the label. And when you look on the back in anything that's put on most sustainable agricultural crops, it'll say apples, it'll say tomatoes, and it'll give you the application rate. Because of what we do and because it's federally illegal, those application rates have never really, we're in the other column.
Yeah.
When we're developing these things, in which we've all developed how to use it. But the reality is we haven't had the advantage of having university peer reviewed giant studies done on any of these.
And you're 100% correct. And it's funny because we were having a discussion, not an argument, a discussion, but he's like, no, I don't like it. I was like, well, this is by definition, but it's because the standards have been set.
100%.
We're dealing with no standards being set. So meaning you could, without anything visible on the eye, and arguably nothing wrong with those products, still failed. You still got product that's bad. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of stuff that can take farms down.
And I've seen it happen, man. I've seen it where it has taken people's gardens down. Look, I will go out and say, we used to have going into the top of that pyramid, I used to have a couple strains at Grassroots that I grew that had real propensity to mold. We figured out that if we lowered the humidity later in flower or earlier in flower, if we cut off the last watering times of the day, so put them to bed dry.
That all these are, by the way, cultural techniques that you're able to adjust.
And made all these adjustments. And what I would do is I would group that room. I would say, hey, these are the 4 genetics that I have problems with.
Yeah.
I'm going to grow these genetics in this room and give them these parameters so that I'm doing everything I can to head these problems off at the pass, in which you're getting, you'd be surprised how many.
But that's a sifting process too. It
takes time. Yeah, it takes time. And it takes, as I say to people all the time, it takes knowing your cultivar, takes putting the time in, taking notes. You know, the kid I had working for me, Austin, who we've shouted out from Peninsula Gardens, that kid's got books and books and books of notes. And you could go, hey, what do we do on day 42 in room number 7? And he'd be like, and not for nothing, I will say that is one thing I took from him very much so, is nowadays, I literally, the last 3 years, I have it in a notebook and I could tell you what was going on there.
No substitute for good notes.
Yeah, and there really isn't. You say it all the time too, but it's definitely one of those things where, you know, it's hard to remember these things, but when you apply different changes, do different things, you know your cultivar, and the best way to know your cultivar is to take good notes.
And so maybe someday, I guess, the end of this, and again, go check out our old episode, the full episode on IPM. I definitely encourage it, and that's why I didn't want to do anything extra here. But, you know, maybe someday we will have more standards set. We will have an ability for more university research. I mean, anything that's consumed, believe it or not, you can look it all up, and it's kind of gross. I mean, even in a can of SpaghettiOs, I think it's like 2 rat turds, you're cool. 3, that's over the threshold. And one thing, how gross is that? But it's for everything, guys. Certain amounts of insect eggs, insect frass, mouse turds, like these things are all listed in every food product.
Well, and one thing I'll say is, you know, this one's for the haters because I love the comments. But the one thing I will say is, I'm coming from a place of experience on this. When I got hired at Sacred Seed in 2017, they had got busted for petroleum-based pesticide usage, in which, for those of you who don't know, petroleum-based pesticides, the myclobutanils, the forbids, the fluoramides, stuff like that, that's derived from petroleum and it becomes part of the plant tissue. And so I had to fit, these people had a very extensive genetic catalog. I had to help them figure out how to get these things out of the plants, in which you're doing research from university papers and stuff. And so that's really where I got my background in figuring this stuff out, in which there's a lot that goes into it. So it's one thing I'm definitely passionate about because of it, because the reality is, if you don't do the right processes, you're going to run into a lot of problems.
Yeah. So let's talk about, and I want you to go into this because this is one of this multi-part episode here that we're doing. This is definitely one of the pieces that you worked, you know, more on, again, because of your experience and a lot of whether it's the chemical control or biocontrols, cultural controls, you know, whatever. But this is the stuff that you guys can actually walk away with and go into your gardens and apply. So we're going to talk about control techniques, including biocontrols for some of the most common pests we see. Specifically, we're going to talk about aphids, thrips, russet mites, and spider mites.
Those are the big dogs. Those are the big 4 that most of us deal with.
Yep. So I'll start off with just kind of talking about, and then I'll let you go with the actual control stuff that you've done. So anyway, aphids, family name Aphididae, are a common pest to gardeners, as we all know, those soft-bodied little bastards. Commercial growers' greenhouse due to their wide species diversity and rapid reproductive cycle. There are some 1,351 species of aphids that are currently recorded in the U.S. and Canada. That's just U.S. and Canada, folks. Yeah,
that's a lot.
That's disgusting. I mean, and those, oh man, when they get all powdery and just like,
they're gnarly, dude. Golly. They are gnarly.
They take out all my brassicas every year.
Yeah.
Hate it. So 80 species are specifically pests of food crops and ornamental plants. Most of them get their names from the plants they attack, i.e. the green peach aphid, the cabbage aphid, or the rose aphid.
Yep.
Moving on.
I got some rose aphids at home.
So what do we do about this, Gabe? How the heck do we control these things?
So the big thing we're going to do is we're going to be first off using the traps. You know, you're going to be, I like the yellow traps.
Blue for thrips.
Yellow for everything else. I'll be honest with you, the yellow works on the thrips too. I know they say blue. I'm just going to tell you, I hang both of them in my rooms.
I totally agree.
The ribbon traps are best for row crops. They save time and energy. Repellent sprays, you know, broadcast spray, garlic barrier.
And these are barrier sprays, people. These are not sprays on the plants. This would be something you'd even literally maybe be going on the outside of even your building or the edges of your fields, things like that.
I had also talked about, especially with some of the disposable, you know, if you're running some of those inflatable bags nowadays, putting a little Tanglefoot on there.
Sure.
You know, just stopping those little bastards. It's a pain in the ass to put on, but honestly, if you have irrigation and stuff, you're good to go from there.
Yep.
Then you're going to have, your general predators. You're going to have green lacewings. Those things are awesome. They definitely take care of things. And you'll be able to, one of the major sites that I use is a company called Arbico. You can also use Copert as well. I know there's other ones out there. One thing as we get into this episode, I just want people to understand, usually you will order your bugs on a Tuesday. It takes a week to get there. So you want to order them a week ahead of time. If you're depending on the company you're dealing with, you can set up a schedule. So that way they will just come when they're supposed to. A lot of the bugs that they're sending you do come from
insects, please.
Right. Insects. A lot of the insects that they send you are coming from Europe.
Yeah.
So,
Good point.
So you definitely want to be cognizant of that when you get them. A lot of times, because they ship on a Tuesday, they come overnight. It will be a Wednesday when you get them. You'll get a big cooler full of stuff. There's going to be cold packs in there. What you're going to want to do is you're either going to want to take them out of that cooler, put them in the fridge, or if you have cold packs in your freezer, you could just put cold packs back in there, but you do want to keep them cool until you're ready to use them. One of the tips I'll give everybody is when you're ready to actually release bugs in your rooms, you're going to want to take them into the room. You're going to want to get them acclimated for a little while, warm them up. If you try and release cold bugs, they're going to be cranky and tired. So I always tell people, leave them out for a little while, put them in the room for a little bit, get them acclimated, and then release them. A couple other good bugs for the aphids are assassin bugs. They're less affected by heat and are effective. They're effective aphid predators. They're actually awesome bugs. Like other predators and parasites, release assassin bugs as a first sighting of aphids.
So again, the predatory stuff, you're not wanting to go in hardcore infestations.
And the other thing you definitely want to, and that's one of the reasons
start early.
Jared and I have talked about it in the past, but that's one of the reasons, if you see an infestation, a lot of times I'll do a knockdown spray and I'll time it. So let's say I do that spray on a Monday and then I get my bugs on Wednesday and release on Wednesday. So that way I've already done some of the work and the bugs are
really playing cleanup.
They're the cleanup crew. I always tell people,
don't do the other way around.
And the reality is sometimes you do end up having to do that, but you always want to have the backup bugs there and ready to go. You know what I mean?
Right.
Another great example is the pirate bugs. Pirate bugs are actually really cool. They're really fast. The one thing I will say, a little disclaimer, when you release pirate bugs, get those suckers out, wear gloves, because they will bite you and it does hurt.
Okay.
Yeah, they're nasty little suckers. They have a little horn, so they look really cool, but they are, the pirate bugs are great predators, just as a generalist as well. And again, you're going to want to do the knockdown sprays. You're going to have the insecticidal soap. Sprays should be used early in the season before the high numbers are spotted. Minimize impacts on existing beneficials with these residual-free sprays. Low-risk beneficial insects when sprayed carefully.
And let me also make sure people understand, we are not going to be talking about hardcore chemical control. All this stuff is going to be organic stuff that's going to be in line with like our multi-rust.
And I would say to use the Botanigard. There's two different types. I generally use the WP wettable. WP stands for wettable powder. Usually it's going to come in a 1 pound container. You are going to want to, as I remember, to keep it in the fridge. It is an amazing product. Basically what it does is it gets into the cuticle. It gets into
bacteria.
It gets into their intestines, and it actually kind of blows them up from the inside. So what you'll end up seeing is aphids kind of running around on the floor with the thorax, I guess. Is that it? With the thorax basically blown out.
Thorax or abdomen.
So, and that makes it so they can't. Makes it so they can't eat. The biggest thing with that is it's going to be a drench. I've actually had it where I made 55-gallon trash cans, and we actually. Yeah, it is. But we were dunking. Yeah, we were dunking 5-gallon plants.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Because you need that full coverage. If you don't get full coverage, you're not going to have
It's got to make contact.
Got to make contact.
And the big thing with aphids is don't let your foot off the gas. Do not let your foot off.
And again, guys, this is a bacteria. Would be classic biocontrol. And then last but certainly not least, good old neem oil. You know, you shout out to our EcoWorks, right? So ours is a cold pressed. Why don't you put EcoWorks up there? It's a cold pressed neem oil. I don't know who the fuck that is, but we don't care about them.
And I do believe Eco is going to be having a different name soon.
It will. Yes, I'll talk about that here in a little bit. Jesus, everybody's always pulling my shit out of the bag. God damn it. Anyway, obviously neem oil acts as a growth and feeding inhibitor while preventing respiration, and that's because of the spiracles, as we talked about earlier, clogging that. Actually, it was in the last episode. It's used as a contact insecticide for moderate infestations, high risk to beneficial insects. Unfortunately, in the growing area, so that's why you would want to time those sprays properly. So now we can talk a little bit about even aphid parasites, because you can attack these things from a variety of different ways, right? So this is where, if you can move that up a little bit, Grambo, this is where some of the naming other way, some of the naming gets a little bit interesting. So
I usually go by the last. I usually go by the last one. So the Colmani, the Abdominalis, the Aphidus Irvi, which I don't think I've used.
Aphidius.
And the Aphidulus aphid. I don't think I've used either of the last two.
I have not. So again, these are all aphid parasites. We'll briefly go through all. Again, they all have their own specific temperatures that we want. So for example, the Aphidius colomani are most effective between 70 and 77, which for most people, that's a little bit of cooler growing environment. Great for HPS, maybe a little bit cool for LEDs. They do require 2 weeks for development. Up to 200 to 300 aphids are attacked by each female, which is pretty wild.
And that means they're going to be doing more of their work at night too.
Yep. Fertilized eggs develop into females and non-fertilized eggs develop into males. Female has a pointed abdomen while the male's abdomen is round shaped. So if you were looking to identify, sounds like the women are the real slayers in that particular category.
Oh yeah.
How about the Aphelinus abdominalis? How about that one? Go.
Yeah, I was going to say they're versatile because they hit a wide range of aphid species, and they work effectively in greenhouses and fields, which means, so the one thing people need to understand when it comes to these bugs too is, you know, the range that they move depending on the bug can, you know, greatly vary how effective they are.
Yeah, all these have a specific temperature and relative humidity they work best at.
And that's definitely something.
Some of them match up with cannabis production and some of them don't.
Well, and that's one of the things I want people to be aware of as well, is the fact that they do have a very specific range. This is the range they thrive in. If it's not that range, does it mean they're going to die? No. But they're not going to move as quickly. They're not going to have as big an appetite. They're not going to be as
their metabolism's not going to be as on top. Yeah. All right. Rather than stumbling over all these words, and we will post this, there is 4 different specific aphid parasites. To be honest with you, we don't deal with aphids a whole lot, specifically in indoor production. So we'll go ahead and not stumble through these last ones. I think you all got the point. Let's talk thrips though. Again, very annoying inside, and turns out to be the largest pest that we deal with agriculturally and horticulturally speaking.
They're definitely, they kind of came out of left field.
Well, but as we're seeing right here, right? So as we mentioned last time, it's out of the Thysanoptera, right? That's the particular order of the class Insecta. The term thrips includes more than 6,000 species. I was not ready for that myself.
Yeah.
They can become serious pests indoors, as we know, outdoors and in greenhouse settings. In general, they are not host specific. However, species such as onion thrips, as Gabe astutely mentioned, and that's what we see on cannabis, and tobacco thrips feed on plants in specific families, which is interesting because onions are not in the same family as they're actually an allium as cannabis, but nonetheless, they seem to love cannabis plants. Adult and larval stages of thrips feed on foliage and lowers, as we mentioned on the last one. The adults and the larvae feed on the same parts. Yeah, that's not common.
You will see a lot more damage down low out of that kind of, and it ends up being, you'll see kind of, you know, a lot of striping on the upper part of the leaves.
And it's not that stippling. It's kind of got those little squiggly lines.
Yeah, they're exactly.
You know what I mean? And it's again, and like a few of them, not a big deal.
And like I was saying before, they like to cruise down the veins. You'll see, and they move quickly.
Even like when they're like in onions, you won't see them. They go down in the creases, right? They like to get all the way down in the creases, which is one of the reasons why they run the veins as well. Damn those thrips. Well, how do we do anything about them, Gabe? What do we do for monitoring prevention?
Well, obviously, monitoring and prevention, inspect the plants early, and often for signs of thrip activity. You're going to be looking for that. You're going to look for any type of scraping on any of the leaves.
Yeah.
That's really that is going to be, and then in that scraping, you'll see again, like we were talking about the frash, you'll see a little bit of the black kind of poop from them, hang blue or yellow sticky traps within the growing area, monitor pest populations. Blue traps are best when beneficials, insects are already present. Like I said, I know they say blue, I'd say the yellows work as well. General predators can keep thrips at low populations, low levels limiting damage, specifically minute pirate bugs. Again, same thing. Why we didn't go a little deeper into those guys on the last one, because the pirate bugs are like general, and they are. Now,
is it minute or minute?
I don't know. It's kind of like there's a lot of words like that.
Yeah, no, there is. And I did we included, just because it's a pretty damn cool genus species name, Orius insidiosus.
Yep. The green lacewing, which I'm also familiar with. Those
nice
things,
one.
Those things are great. Again, just a good generalist predator. And then the ladybugs. We'll discuss ladybugs a little bit later. I honestly don't think ladybugs are the best.
Not for thrips specifically.
Just in general, ladybugs are cool. But I've been in gardens where I'm like, you're walking right by what you're supposed to be eating.
But it's 10-1. The adults don't care. They're not hungry. What you have to do, and to your point, you have to give them the conditions they want to stick around. If there's not conditions they want to stick around, they leave and then they do nothing.
Yeah.
If you're not getting the adults to stick around and lay eggs, which I'll have an egg picture pulled up here in a little bit because I think they're really cool looking. If they're not sticking around and laying eggs, you will never have larvae, which means you'll never have control from ladybugs. So anyhow, biocontrols though.
Biocontrols, the nematodes need a nematode, and I think that's the Steiner Nema, as I remember.
I think you're right.
The nematodes are great. A lot of times if you are using nematodes, I don't like to run them through my injection system. If I'm doing doing irrigation, I do like to hand water them in, but nematodes are always beneficial. Honestly, I promote the use of no problems at all. Use nematodes.
So, and obviously with nematodes, what's happening is they're reproducing in the soil, right?
Yep.
So they're going in, and that's actually where the life cycle part that they're attacking. They're actually attacking the eggs.
Yep.
So that's what they're targeting, which is really nice, which is really interesting, and that's where the life cycle is broken. Because no matter what you're doing, you got to break the life cycle somewhere, whether it's in the larval stage, whether it's in the egg stage, or whether it's in the adult stage.
I love the cucumaris. Cucumaris are great. They're predatory mites used for thrip prevention, control, and continued management. They feed on immature thrips, multiple species of mites. So that's the other thing I love about cucumaris is they're good for spider mites and stuff like that. For best results, release before thrips become a serious issue. Obviously, establishment can take a while with these things. So
6 to 8 weeks.
So that's one of the big things you want to be aware of.
You really got to culture those things.
You honestly, you want to be dropping them in veg. You know what I mean?
Like
early. Yeah. So the Swirsky's, which I've also used, can be used as thrip control and reproduce more quickly than the cucumaris. And in optimal conditions are going to be 77 to 85 degrees with relative humidity of 70%. So those people who are running a little that VPD train, that's going to be really good for them. That's going to be the bug for you. The Scietetics, they feed on a number of soil dwelling pests, including thrips, pupae, pre-pupae, and the pupae. For insecticidal sprays, obviously you want to get early knockdown and again, be utilizing those predators pretty heavily. Neem oil is an effective knockdown spray and one of the best sprays for garden thrip control. Obviously you can use our Eco for that. Azadirachtin sprays worked as feeding growth inhibitors that can be combined with pyrethrins to increase and impact coverage. Use thrip control spray for severe infestations. Obviously these two things are really, you're going to want to be using in veg.
Yeah.
You're not going to want to be using those
oil-based
in the flower.
Too. Yep. Don't put them under flowers.
The PFR 97 has shown great results controlling thrips with other soft-bodied insects, especially greenhouse or indoor setting. It poses minimal risks to beneficial insects and is compatible with most other pesticides.
And what is the PFR 97 specifically?
I'll be honest with you, I don't know. I've never used it.
I've never used it either. That was something that got pulled up. Let's pull that up.
I just saw it got pulled in there. The other thing I would say is if you're in a position where you're outside and you're not in a cannabis garden and you're allowed to use spinosad, use spinosad. It is awesome. And I will also say our multi. You know,
Yep.
our multi works great. You know, what I would say with thrips as well is you do want to be kind of rotating your products, getting different modes of action.
It's a fungus. It's one of those funguses.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah,
Yep.
that's cool.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so it's a fungus that grows on the thrip itself
wow.
and actually takes it out. That's pretty dope.
Isaria fumo. So yeah.
Apopka strain 97. Okay, I got the rest
I like the Apopka part.
Apopka, Florida.
That sounds cool.
Shout out to Florida.
I like that. I might have to check
Put that in the old repertoire.
Well, first off, as anybody knows, if you're doing anything with cannabis, you gotta make sure it's registered in your state. So
And the beautiful part of both multi-russet and eco, for that matter, they're all 25B, meaning you can use them in home application, commercial application, countrywide.
And I'll be a Jug Dealer whore real quick and say, we got new cocoa, you guys. The Scietetics cocoa, under $5 for a whole.
That. And that is fluffed bags.
Brand new. So check it out. It's a brick.
That's a block.
That's a brick. Fluffs up. And guys, we've been checking. If you know me and any of my history, you know I check a lot of cocoa working with the people I do. This stuff's really good.
All right. Come and get it. JugDealers.shop.
Yes.
All right. Let's move on a little bit. What do we got next? So, God, the russet. Now,
I don't even like. I don't even like.
I saw the word.
I don't even like talking about these fuckers.
Oh, God. Okay. However, admittedly, you and I were talking the other day, and we're like, it's just not. Well, let's see if we can guess what it is. They're not as bad as they used to be. Okay. So
I remember when they first, there's always stories about who brought it here.
All right.
And he's a friend of mine, so I'm not going to dig, but there were genetics that came here, I believe, from Oregon, from the Northwest, but
spoiler alert.
Yeah. People got to understand.
What are we talking about here, Gabe?
The russet.
The russet.
I don't even want to say it.
I didn't want to say it either. That's why I made you.
Let's say before 2013, in Colorado, you pretty much dealt with the spider mite.
That was it.
And like
no
thrips,
powdery,
no powder, no russets.
Not enough thrips to even notice. I didn't really,
thrips weren't out a thing.
Like,
I never saw.
I'm sure they were around, but it wasn't. They're so small, you don't see them. I didn't see the damage.
Spider mites was the effing problem.
Oh, dude,
that was the bane.
They were bad.
And like like I said before, you'd use floramite. Because you didn't know any better or whatever.
When he says you, he's not talking me.
Not
folks.
him. And they'd be out there scrubbing behind their ears. They'd be like, "Yeah, you missed a spot, bro."
Well,
like,
hit it
again.
We talked about a lot of these places. Like we've been into down in Florida, the facility we went in, and it was an old. I want to say it was an old rose growing facility or whatever, right? So many of these old ag facilities. Why? Because they have greenhouses, they have the infrastructure, they've got the power, they've got all these things, right? And so they have these failed operations, the agricultural
and then
operations,
they got super bugs in there,
and then they've got these super bugs that have been getting hit. And a lot of these places are ornamentals. Yeah. So now, like you're talking, right? So
they're
you go back
used to those petroleum-based pesticides.
And now we're going back and talking about the whole IPM.
They're like,
thing.
I use this to clean my teeth,
and we talk about the whole IPM thing, and we go, well, Jesus, these things have been literally beat over the head with the gnarliest stuff because people aren't consuming it, people aren't smoking it.
Yeah, they didn't cycle, they wouldn't switch. They would just use heavier doses of the same shit.
Yes.
And so, they did end up building.
I know of a place, and I'll leave them unnamed. I know of a place that walked away from a facility, and they have another one that's in the same state that's incredibly successful. The original one, because where it was taking over an old ag facility. It was green. They could never, whether it was the indoor or outdoor, they could not get rid of their bugs.
I was just telling Eugene the other day a story about a grow here in Pueblo, whatever it's
Pueblo.
But he had bought the grow. He had bought the grow off some folks.
Yeah,
it had spray insulation in the entire building.
Yeah,
they had the previous grow. They had sprayed heavy duty pesticides for years. The insulation was little pieces, just little tiny pieces, were falling down on the plants. This guy was growing organic, and it was falling.
Or so he thought.
It was falling in the soil. It was falling in the soil. Guy's harvest ends up testing hot for pesticides, and he couldn't figure out what the hell was going on. Well, turns out that insulation was falling in the plants and the pesticides.
I went to a facility where it was an old, they had, and I even called it. I was like, these are gassing chambers for bananas, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they're like,
ethylene chambers.
Yeah, ethylene. So this is a storage warehouse, which God knows what kind of pesticides have been brought to that place and the residuals that are left in there. Anyway, a lot of things you deal with. This is stuff that you deal with out there, right, guys? There's ideal, which ideal is what
it's building from scratch.
It's building from scratch, and if you didn't have a budget and you did all the right things, that's ideal. And then there's real. That's what actually happens in real life. It's like when you go, okay, here's a perfect room. I'm going to put all the lights right here, and then you get to that room, there's a pole in the middle of the room.
Or saying what kind of parent you're going to be. When I have kids, I am never going to give them sugar. Yeah, right.
Sounds like Graham Beezy's been giving the kid a little sugar and feeling guilty.
It's their school. They get you at school.
Hey,
That's true.
I just took
all places
on this trip we just took. I just took Marius to McDonald's for the first time.
Oh,
He's 12.
Wow. Good job, Gabe.
I felt
Good
bad
job.
about it though. I felt
12
bad
is the
about
right age,
But
right?
No, he's been to McDonald's plenty of times, just not with me.
All right, that's a fair admission. Okay, let's tackle
the. Give me the.
I'm going to talk.
I don't even want to read it. So
I'll read it. Okay, russet mites, along with hemp russet mites, which there is, again, as we've kind of, I think, already come to the conclusion of, if it's a russet mite, there's going to be more than one. So the hemp russet mites is what we have identified being our main problem. They are some of the most damaging and difficult to control pests affecting growers today. Many species are host specific and prefer monocultured growing areas, tomato growers in particular. So why do you think we had one of the problems with us? Because we've been monocropping, right? And even if it's different strains in there, let's be honest, folks, that's still a monocrop.
Yep.
It's all still cannabis. Yep. Okay. Anyway, they're very hard to spot and they're incredibly quick to reproduce. And their rate of reproduction, every degree that it goes up, multiplies in an exponential. Yeah. It's not a linear curve. It's an exponential curve. So pretty wild stuff. They do not produce noticeable webbing like the spider mites do. Members of the Aerophiidae family of mites. They typically, Aerophiids, that's what it is. Aerophiidae. There we go.
Of course.
But of course, they typically move in without being evident. That's what's tough. Yeah, nobody notices.
It's like they said in Thailand, you don't know till you know.
You don't know. Oh, fudge. Oh, wow.
All right.
It's like they...
Mouth parts?
Yeah. Oh, God. So hard to notice them. They can build a large population before any of the damage systems are evident. So that's what's even I've seen happen is like something that like you're not doing preventative sprays.
You see that rusting at the crown.
I've seen it where I didn't get into like week 5, and then it was like everything just started like finishing and dying and tanking. Yeah. Like, what's going on? Yeah. And it wasn't Septoria or something like that. It's russet mites, but you don't notice. They come in unnoticed. Things look nice and healthy. Once they're there, they get you hard. Yeah, their minute size allows them to hitch rides in new areas on clothing and remove debris in the air and even on other insect pests like whiteflies. So they're so small they can hop on a whitefly and just catch it to another plant. Wow. Ain't that some shit?
And you need a scope to see them.
Absolutely. Sanitation is absolutely imperative in infected areas. Warm, dry, windless conditions encourage mite populations. At least make it harder on them, folks. Get a little wind movement going on. Make it harder for them to get around. They grow more rapidly when you're not giving them those kind of conditions. You need to keep it windy, all that kind of stuff. But they will target plant growth where conditions provide shelter.
Dude, wind is some of the best IPM. There's a grow in Maryland that will remain unnamed because it's a big grow, but they got a chiller system. No fans in any of the rooms. Yeah. And I'm like, how is this? Here's the thing too. Like even from a horticultural standpoint, like you're reducing that boundary layer as well. That is a static layer that's there that allows, because the plants aren't sucking. I know this is a little bit off topic, but whatever. Screw it. No, because it is part of the IPM. So no, it's not.
No, okay. You're right. So at the end of the day, you need that boundary layer to be reduced because the plants don't suck in CO2. It's more of a passive process. So
Brandon Russ put up a really cool video of the stomata like opening and closing.
Right.
And it's like you're like watching it breathe.
Right.
You know?
But what it's doing, if it's open, gas can bump around and get in there. If it's closed, obviously it can't. But even when it's open, it's not sucking it in. It's a passive process. And so if you have the boundary layer, which is that static layer that makes it even harder for the gas to get in there when you have static air layers, that's why one of the reasons why you actually want to have some air movement, not necessarily overly aggressive air movement, but some type of air movement for sure. And it's also going to promote moving that, because also that static air layer, when they're the stomata are open and they're actually transpiring. Well, it's harder for that water vapor to actually move away from the plant when it's getting stuck in that boundary layer. So that's another reason actually.
And microclimates, right? Like
so you're reducing the microclimates. Yep, absolutely. So enough about that.
Grambo.
He's learning, everybody.
Cute little thing over there.
Fun.
Follow me on Instagram.
Okay, so treatment, we already kind of talked about to start with sanitation, removing that debris, not just leaving dead stuff around.
That should be a standard. You
Always. That's number one, right? Maintaining irrigation so you're not allowing it to get really hot and dry, because if you do let those plants get too dry, that actually allows the mites to attack even harder, right? And then supporting that beneficial insect population, which is good to do, obviously. All these things are good to do in veg and flower. These are across the board. Sanitation, you should always be keeping your shit clean, folks.
Sulfur is a great one. A lot of people here or there, the big thing I would say is if you are using sulfur, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll hit them with sulfur. I'll wait 2 days. I'll do a xylitol spray.
And this is a sprayable sulfur, correct? This is not
micronized.
This is not your sulfur gas burner.
You can
just be clear.
Yeah, you can use the silver bullet. I prefer the micronized just because it's way cheaper, and it's essentially it's very similar. I think there's something that's slightly different about the silver bullet, but it is effective. The big thing is you want to make sure if you're using any of these other sprays, the azadirachtin or some of the other things we're going to suggest, that you do come in with a xylitol like 2-3 days later, rinse it, and then use your oil. Same thing again, if you're going to go back the other way, or if you're using any type of oil product, that is what I will caution against. The other thing I would say to anybody is,
and this is only when you're flip-flopping back and forth from sulfur to oil, just to be clear. If you're just flip-flopping back and forth, let's say from russet to multi to russet to multi, no need for any of the xylitol, no need for a wash.
I would say just if you're doing the oils. The other thing I would say as well is really, it says here not to use it, to only use it in veg. I'd probably go about 6-7 days in the flower, no longer.
Sure.
The big thing you got to worry about is it just getting into any of the pistils. It will affect it. Here's the deal. If you're making extracts, definitely no, because it will affect the extracts. It'll give them that rotten egg kind of flavor. That's really where you're going to run into problems. And I'm not saying if you're using it for flower, don't, to run it any longer. I would say just that is where you would really notice it, is if you were doing extracts and stuff. We've got azadirachtin sprays, Azera gardening, Azagard, Moltex.
We've got the russet that's right there behind you. Right,
we got russet. Russet is the big one. This stuff, dude, it works.
And there's nothing else out on the market that's actually marketed and labeled as russet. Okay. So that's one of the things. Did we go pretty aggressive on that? You're darn right we did.
Yep. The pure crop one is great. Again, I would always recommend, we're going to tell you to use our products. Of course we are. I would also recommend using other products out there as well, purely because you want different modes of action. You hit them from the left, hit them from the right, hit them down the gut. You don't want the same thing over and over and over. We have some oil-based sprays. Eco Works, primarily used in veg, can be used in conjunction with the russet and the Scietetics. Remember, folks, if you're doing that, it's a 1-to-3 ratio. So it's 5-to-15 on the Eco. Remember that with the oil. It's 10-to-30 with the other products. So just keep that in mind.
And we'll bang that in your head here in a little bit again too.
Couple of great bugs. One of my favorite, the Californicus. These things are awesome. The Andersoni, and again, as usual, the Swirsky and the Cucumaris. Those guys, again, generalist predators, great bugs. If you need any information on these things at all, you can go to Arbico. They break down every single bug, the perfect conditions, what they're best for, all these different things. Remember as well, as long as these things have food, they're going to reproduce. So that's always helpful. And they are your best employees.
They are, and they work for free as long as you keep the conditions
as long as you feed them, they work for free. It works pretty good.
Let's go on to the last one. And these are the big four, the spider mites. It's funny is I feel like spider mites were really, really bad at one point in time. Then we kind of all figured it out a little bit.
If you grew in the 90s, if you grew in the 2000s, that was
spider mites.
That was your.
And then I feel like we've moved through russet mites a little bit, and now we're seeing some of the other things, like the viruses and viroids and things like that are moving through. I personally think that those are bigger ultimate issues.
Yeah, and then that's going to be an interesting road to.
But we're talking insects today.
Yeah.
So. Maybe we'll do that another time. So spider mites, Gabe, why don't you give us the lowdown on the old spider mites?
Spider mites are common pests on many outdoor crops, including berries, ornamentals, vines, many fruit trees, hemp, and cannabis. There are many subspecies of spider mites in the tetra. What was it? You're so good.
Let's see.
I'm going to let you.
Tetranicus genus. There we go.
Genus including the Pacific spider mite, two-spotted spider mite, which is the one we seem to deal with the most. You'll recognize those by the two spots on their ass end, and the strawberry spider mite. Some species are more easily identified than others. As we said, the two-spotted you usually can tell. Graham, are you going to pull up a picture of this damn thing?
I mean,
oh God,
it's one of the few bugs that you can really eyeball.
You can really
pull out your loop,
right?
Yeah, you can spot them with a loop, eh?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. 100%.
However, it is generally. There you go.
There you go. And just to remind everybody, this is not of the class Insecta. This would be the class Arachnida. Arachnids. Yep. It's got 8 legs instead of 6. Folks.
It's generally unnecessary to do this as their biology damage and control measures are similar or the same. The one thing I will say about the spider mites is if you are looking to identify spider mites in your garden, you're going to be looking on the bottom side of the leaves.
Good call.
So they are, it's not going to be like a leaf miner that's on the top. The other thing that I would say as well is you're when you spray your plants, which is going to be one of the effective ways to deal with them, you're going to have to spray the underside of the leaves. One of the techniques I've used in the past, especially as you're going to be wearing gloves or whatever proper IPM is required, or whatever PPE is required. A lot of times what I do is I'll spray underneath and I'll actually run my hands up the plant like this. So I'm actually getting full contact.
How's that again?
Of course, Grambo.
All right, we're
Grambo got off.
We're age-gated. God dang it.
We just ruined the show.
Yeah, we had a good one going too.
You do want to be, and not for nothing.
Now, what do you think about dunking? I've always used that as well, but that can be problematic too.
But again, it's tough with bigger plants. I don't have a problem with it.
I also like the ones where you got the sprayers that you just have the little turn.
Yep.
It's got the little cone on it, so you can turn it the other way and just really get under it. But I do like that.
I know there's a lot of people that use the paint sprayers. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not a fan of the paint sprayer. Why? Because I've had one of those motors blow on me and it actually mixed oil with my spray and then I fucking ruined some plants, dude. So like I've steered away from those.
Okay,
I know there's a lot of people who use them and that's fine. I'm not going to, and ultimately you do need to change the tips. So you're using the right micron.
Yep.
There is a sprayer that I like to use, which we'll give a shout out to. It's called the Sebring sprayer. They're actually made here in Loveland, Colorado. I was turned on to them. I was turned on to them here in a garden I worked on. The nice thing about those is they actually have an agitator in there that if when you, again, like I've said,
you don't have to think about keeping shaking it all. It's doing its movement.
The reality is when you read the directions on some of these pesticides, they tell you that you need to have an agitator.
It needs constant agitation.
So because it's going to fall out of suspension. So that is it, man. That is the unit. These things are awesome. They're not cheap. They're not cheap.
Does not look cheap.
Doesn't look like it's for your home grow.
But no, it's not for the home grow. This is when I talk about things, it's generally,
wow.
I'll be honest with you. I use like at home, they have like a small electric one from Home Depot. It's great. The biggest problem you run into is if you're running zero tol or stuff like that, it tends to wear the parts out on it.
Sure.
Those Sebrings are really nice. And again, one of the big things is the agitator. It is a very important part for a lot of pesticides that we use, and make sure, as I would always say, read those damn directions.
Read the directions. Okay. So as part of sanitation, right, we know that removing any webbing and things like that, there's some cultural control to it. Now, riddle me this. I didn't see this get put on there, and I know you worked on this part of it. Where is the vacuum as an option? Is that not on there?
The shop vac was an option.
Guilty. Fucking guilty.
One reason that we're glad the black market is fading out.
I've done it. I've told you in the past, spider mites go to the highest part of the plant. So I've actually seen it where people had like a cup of oil above the plant with a string that went down to the plant.
And then they climb up it.
There's another, I don't even know if I want to say it, because there's another friend that I've had that I will just say applied a current to the plants.
Okay.
And
grounded it, if you will.
Yes. And that took care of things. You can figure anything else out you want from there. I'm not going to give you all the secrets, but there's all kinds of ways to take care of it.
Electroterps.
Yeah, don't forget the vacuum. We'll make sure that makes
Don't forget the vacuum.
We'll make sure that makes the list next time.
I thought it was just me. I'm glad. It's like, shout out, Jared.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the cultural control and prevention. Obviously, we're going to optimize the growing condition of the crop being grown, whether it's cannabis or anything else in the environment being cultivated. If we can couple that up with a beneficial insect, or even also, or decouple that, let's say, with a damaging insect as well, right? So if you're giving it an environment that it doesn't necessarily like reproducing, that's quite nice.
Spider mites like it hot and dry. If you're, a lot of the predators that like spider mites like it a lot more humid. So obviously when you have those conditions, it's going to speed up the predators. It's going to slow down. It's going to slow down the spider mite. The other thing too, and actually it's not on here, but the Slicium. Silicium
now you see you're getting ahead of us.
I was going to say Silicium.
Now you're getting ahead of us.
I was just thinking about it because when you said that.
we are going to talk about Silicium because it does reduce any and all abiotic and biotic stresses.
It just increases the thickness of that cell wall, in which when it's harder for a bug to bite through that cell wall,
it's going to go somewhere else.
They're not going to want to eat.
Either it's not going to be able to do it or it's going to go somewhere else. And really the other thing, minimizing mite damage by reducing water and nutrient stress is really important as well. If you're over-nuding, under-nuding, that just gives anything, whether it's pest disease, gives them an in. It gives them a foot in the door.
Foot in the door. Like
that one of those dirty little 6 feet in the door, or 8 as the case may be.
Arachna.
8 as the case may be. So anyway, really working and adding, and actually I heard this Therm X70, which I wasn't familiar with, but it looks like it's some kind of I'm thinking even like a fulvic acid in all reality. So pull it out. And if not, I would definitely say always run a fulvic acid, just because that is going to maximize nutrient uptake. It is going to condition the rhizosphere to maximize that uptake, so your plants are keep clicking along. Because in reality,
it's a surfactant.
It's just a surfactant. Okay. No, that's all it is. And it's a wetting agent. Yucca. So you can. So that'd be like basically it's just reducing the surface tension when you're watering with it is one of the things that's doing. Anything you can do to get your plants through these hot spells will help control mite control, which again, that's Slicium, because it is, whether it's creating those thicker cell walls or whatever, to reduce insect attack, but it's also going to reduce any abiotic stresses as well. Heat, desiccation, wind, stuff like that. I mean, I can't believe how big the plants I can grow sometimes in little solo cups. They look absolutely perfect, still nice and turgid. It's just like when you know that a frost is coming and you water your plants. It seems a little bit counterintuitive, but you're trying to keep that turgidity, right? You're trying to keep everything nice and turgid, everything in, because then it's at max. It's basically at max operational capacity to knock off anything that's going to come and try and mess its day up. Okay. Knock down a chemical control, because damn it, sometimes it's needed. Existing spider mite population should be treated with organic knockdown sprays if allowed, which is lovely. Like we're talking about our multi specifically, but even going back and forth multi russet with the eco. Let's see here. Naturally derived metacidal sprays like neem oil, pyrethrins, azadirachtin, horticultural oil, which is really just like a mineral oil, can be sprayed directly onto adult mites, larvae, nymphs, and eggs to kill on contact. Apply to active spider mite infestations at 3-day intervals, and if you don't, you're screwed, because that's how quick they are actually reproducing until control is achieved. If you're able to even achieve it, they are difficult. Horticultural oils can also be applied to overwintering sites to reduce egg populations. That I found kind of interesting. Yep. We don't deal with that a lot because we don't typically have a lot of debris around, but if you were doing, like, let's say doing some beds or something like that, and maybe even growing in the same place year to year outdoor, that's kind of interesting as well. Obviously you want to exercise caution when applying any oil-based sprays in high temperatures, anything over 80 or intense lighting. You're always either going to do it no lighting or low lighting. Miticide should be used as a last resort in the flowering period of growth. I do repeat, last resort. Utilize biological control methods instead, which we will talk about right now. Go ahead, Gabe.
You gotta roll that down for me, Grambo. I can't remember. So ideal for spider mite control during flowering. Introduce beneficial insects after knocking down spider mites for continued control. Match your growing conditions with mite predators. Optimal conditions and time releases in conjunction with other integrated pest management approaches. Like I was saying earlier, as far as timing everything, you got mite predators, you got the Persimilis, you got the Californicus, the Andersoni, the Neocelis falacis. It's been a while since I've seen those. The long pipes, which was always one of my favorites, and the Occidentals. Those things are great. Just overall mite predators. You have the spider mite destroyers, the Feltiella, and the Stetlithosaurus. Those ones are also great. And then generalist predators, like we've said before, the pirate bugs, the ladybugs, the assassin bugs, and the green lacewings.
I thought it was kind of interesting that there's some that were so specific. I mean, that's a whole host of, you got mite predators, which are more of a general mite predator. And then the destroyers, right?
Yeah, the spider mite destroyers are pretty badass. The Feltiella I've used a bit of, and they're pretty effective. Ladybugs, or should we say lady beetles, as they are from the class Coleoptera, not Hemiptera, which are the true bugs. Yeah, so ladybugs are one of the best known beneficial insects for controlling pests in the gardens, greenhouses, and farms. A widely used, cost-effective alternative to other treatments, ladybugs are easy to release and have a great reputation as generalist predators. Now, collected and prepared for shipment, live ladybugs are best used when pest numbers are low, and they can be used to fight existing infestations. So, a big thing with those is they're going to breed. You're going to get more. That's another thing that's really great about those. Simply release them in areas of pest activity and allow them to do the work. Avoid spraying pesticides or fungicides while ladybugs are active for pest control.
Can you pull up again? Let's take a look. We all know what the lady beetle looks like, right? We're very familiar with that. But let's look at the larva, those little dinosaurs. And then let's take a look at the eggs, because you're going to want to be able to identify the eggs. And honestly, if you don't know, they're these little orange legs that are hanging on the underside of a leaf, and you saw them there, you would probably freak you out a little bit. You'd be like, this isn't correct, right? So we'll wait for our man. There we go. Okay, so there's the larva right there. Little dinosaur looking guys. You would never, ever.
I remember the first time I saw one, I was like, what the hell is that?
Yeah, and
that's what it looked like, more like that.
Yeah, and that's a little bit farther along. So they have a little bit, you can see that's even farther along, right? They're getting that metamorphosis.
You see them eating those thrippies right there in that last picture?
Was that it, thrips?
That's what it looked like. Go back. One more. Yes.
Yeah. They're going to town. They're going to town. Yep. Now, if we can get a ladybug, the eggs, because again, what you're going to want to do is have the optimal conditions. You want them to stick around.
You want them.
You can't force them to stick around. The only thing you do is give them food, give them some water, and give them a place that they want to be via conditions.
Now, one thing that was interesting is I think I was releasing Swirsky's and Cucumaris, and one of my employees comes to me and he goes, Swirsky eat Cucumaris. It was one way or the other. I'm sure someone will call out in the chat and bust me on something, but it was one way or the other.
The eggs.
And I called Arbico and I was like, hey, one of my employees just came to me. They said Swirsky's eat Cucumaris. And the lady goes to me, she goes, look, they will eat each other, but only after they've run out of their primary food source.
Oh.
So
in some ways, they just clean themselves up.
I've definitely seen some things where people discuss, hey, don't drop these because they eat one of your other predators. If you do have any questions, they are extremely helpful at Arbico. So, but I would say anybody who tells you that's what they told me, was that, hey, they're going to eat their primary source of food first. Then once they run out of that, sure, they might eat some Swirsky.
Let's pull that graphic up again real quick. And it's just showing that life cycle, which I believe is complete metamorphosis, being that it looks completely different. But you got the adults going to the eggs. Those eggs are like little torpedoes. They're in little groupings like that. See them on the bottom side of the leaves. It's definitely one of those things. Maybe even the top side as well. I think sometimes they're standing straight up. Yep. Sometimes even actually on the stems, if I remember right?
Yeah, you've seen them on the stems, down by where the
petiole's coming in. Yep, absolutely. So if you see those, that's a great thing. That's a great sign. The larvae, those are the killers, man. They're eating 10 to 1 of what the adults do. The people actually eat quite a bit as well.
And I was going to say, like I was saying to people, when you get the bags, you're going to want to wet that bag down. You're going to want to put it in your room, kind of under the canopy, and just let it sit for like an hour or two.
Just let her do
that'll get those things to really wake up and rock and roll. And then you can start releasing.
So they do, and what we classically know them eating, they do primarily feed on aphids, but will prey on a variety of other pests, including mealybugs, thrips, soft scale whiteflies, and spider mites, allegedly. The benefits of ladybugs being that they are shipped to you in the adult stage, essentially, in theory, ready to feed. But as Gabe has seen himself, those adults
they just
hard.
Take a little while. But once they're up, once they are voracious. But they got to wake up.
Highly mobile. Obviously, they can fly. They, being that they are coleoptera, meaning they have wings. They are beetles. Highly mobile, allowing them to travel plant to plant. General predators that feed on most soft-bodied insects. Each adult can consume up to 5,000 aphids in a lifetime, primarily done in the larval stage, as the larvae can eat 50 to 60 aphids per day. Not the 200 to 300 that the one did, but 50 to 60. That's not too bad. Optimal temperature 62 to 88. So for cannabis growers, that's right there in the meat. And shouldn't be a problem.
I guess I didn't know this either, but Arbico is kind of discouraged. They're not saying they won't sell them to you, but they are discouraging. They're trying to encourage people to find other methods because apparently we're starting to run short on them.
Which I found interesting. I think there's just probably very few breeders in the world or whatever, right? Yeah. So a little tip here, and this is just adding on to what Gabe was saying, to help keep ladybugs around, attract native species by planting perennial and annual flowering plants outdoors, obviously, a good bug blend essentially, and by avoiding chemical sprays, as we said, cultivating an area with plenty of shaded areas for protection. They like dense canopies. They like a varied habitat. If it's too open and airy and things like that, that's not ideal for ladybugs. These methods may not keep all the ladybugs on site, but that should help keep them around for as long as possible, which is what you want. You want them to get those eggs going. If you've had issues with ladybug flight, consider, as we said, some of these other generalists, the assassin bugs, the green lacewings, and probably even the pirate bugs too.
And as you can tell, a lot of these bugs we've mentioned for multiple different,
and they're generalist predators. Now, as we always like to do, we've talked about all these things. What of the 5/8 products actually makes sense to all this? And Gabe kind of blew the top on it a little while ago, but let's talk about Slicium first, which we like to call our liquid insurance. And why is that, Gabe?
Well, basically, it is gonna basically give you monomer-sized particles that will not form polymers. So basically, it's going to be the smallest size available. You can use it as a drench. You can use it as a foliar. It's really going to help increase the thickness of that cell wall. And if anything, it's going to help it so that the plant can do more of the work itself.
Yeah. And the reason I like to call it liquid insurance, because it's one of those things, it is not a plant essential nutrient. It's a plant beneficial, right? Even though silica is one of the most prevalent elements that is in the Earth's crust. So it's very available to plants and they do use it. Is it needed? Not necessarily. So why do we even get it? Well, first off, a mono-and-orthosilicic acid, which is essentially the same term. It's just a flip-flop, right? Those are interchangeable terms, mono and ortho. Anybody that tries to say different is not correct. That form of mono-and-orthosilicic acid is actually what a potassium silicate has to be transformed into to be uptakeable. This is the uptakeable form.
Well, and that's the big thing is you definitely see people out there with different forms of silica, calisilica, all different types of silica. It's not a question of whether it's there. It's a question of whether it's available. And on a particle size this size, it is
So what they actually do is they reduce it to a monomer, dimers, and trimers, 1, 2, and 3 cells of mono-and-orthosilicic acid, and they stabilize it at a very low pH. Super concentrated, using it at 0.5 ml a gallon. Add it in first. Again, like Gabe said, you can do it full or at 2 mils a gallon. I like to call it liquid insurance because, again, you don't need it, but when you need it, you're glad you have it. So let's say your air conditioner knocks off or you forget the water or something like that. That's the insurance aspect of it. Do we need insurance, health insurance, until we break our arm? No.
The other part
then when we do, we're pretty fucking happy.
Well, and the other part is too, at the end of flower, when those branches are heavy, it's going to help them. I always say it makes your plant more rubbery. But you're going to get a little more bend, a little less break.
A little more bend, a little less break. So with that one, obviously hit us up for samples. If there's anybody commercially, there are other products in the market that are similar. I will tell you right now, we are cleaner. We get it directly imported from the manufacturer, and it is also going to be much less expensive for you. So hit us up for some samples, give it a try out. And then of course we can't walk out here without talking about the pesticides. We've been dancing around them. Let's talk a little bit more specifically about them because I think, and hopefully we haven't been too confusing, but let's just break each one of them out, look at them. Let's start with Eco. If we could pull up the Eco there.
And once again, we don't have Eco right now. We pulled it down as it is being rebranded.
Corrected, yes. And so that is, and I'll actually make that, so it will be AI for Azadirachta indica, actually, because that is the scientific name now that we went over the taxonomy of the neem tree. So it will be called AI, and it will be marketed. It's going to be the exact same stuff. It'll be marketed a little bit more as our spreader sticker because that's how it sits in the line. It is a cold pressed neem oil. It is virgin cold pressed neem oil, in fact, from high quality neem seed kernels. Special formulation contains azadirachtin, hundreds of limonoids, fatty acids, esters, and 100% natural neem ingredients. Acts as a repellent, anti-feed, and insect growth regulator, pest life cycle disruptor, and last but not least, and ovicide. So that's what it is. Look, you can see it's up there. Even Arbico's got it.
I was going to say, I couldn't find it anywhere, but Arbico's
got it. So
Thanks,
this is
Arbico.
actually, you're going to see this specifically, this label now specifically.
And it doesn't cost $300.
No, it does not.
That's a giant jug.
It's very large. That's
It's
2.5 gallons.
It's like
2.5 gallons.
Very cheap, very cheap.
And this is what you're going to actually see in lawn and garden. We'll be having the exact same product, but labeled under our stuff here coming real soon. Let's see here. Multi.
We got the multi. It's a proprietary mixture of utilizing commonly found food-based ingredients recognized according to 25B exemption, safe and effective integrated pest management practices. This recipe is especially effective for thrips, fungus gnats, but not limited to eradicating, controlling mites. Hey, Grandma, you mind sliding that up just a touch? Aphids, white flies, and other soft-bodied insects in their area. 25B meaning it is compliant, so that way you should be filling out pesticide logs if you're in any commercial cultivation, but it doesn't involve having the EPA registration number and all the rest of that stuff.
Correcto. Okay, now let's talk about the russet. Again, like we were saying, it's the only one that's actually branded russet that's out there, right? Can you grab the bottle there, Gabe, and just show that beautiful product? Move the slide that up a little bit there, Grandpa. Okay. Again, a proprietary mixture utilizing commonly found food-based ingredients, just like the multi. Also recognized as 25B, which is exempt and safe and effective for integrated pest management practices that we talked about. This recipe is exceptionally effective for russet and spider mites in all their life stages, including eggs. So it's also an ovicide. Usage rate, 1-to-3 ratio, Eco works to the multi and the russet. You flip-flop back and forth between them. So as a preventive, it'd be 5 Eco and 15 either multi or russet. And for knockdown, it's going to be 15, 30, 15 Eco, and then 30 of either the multi or the russet. So hopefully I made that clear, but we've been trying to fight with keeping it as clear as possible for a while.
As soon as you change things, like as soon as it's not in equal parts, that's why Scietetics is equal parts, people.
That's why we
because so many people with the new millennium were like, I don't understand the 1-to-3 thing.
Even though, GH is 1-to-3 forever. But anyway,
so Lucas formula. Hello.
Being that this particular episode was so full of other things that were going on, we actually, some of the other stuff that we talk about, like the current events, straight talk, things like that, we have left those out today. Did want to make a little bit of a mention about Gabe being out on the East Coast for the month of July. Hit him up. He'll come by, come through the facilities, come by the shop, stuff like that. So essentially, give me your dates, Gabe. When are you going to be out there?
I will be on the East Coast June 28th through August 1st. If you want me to come up to your shop, I'd love to take a look. I'm going to be up in New York mid-July. So I will be up, let's say Central New York, July 10th through like the 15th, 16th. I'd love to come take a look at what's going up in there. Massachusetts, hit me up. Love to come see what you got going on.
So again, month of July, hit them up. I'll actually be Colorado bound essentially till looks like about the first week of August. I think I'm going to do a quick trip down to Florida, Tampa area, go see the boys down at Urban Roots with the boys and girls, Zach and Bianca, very good friends of mine. Hit them up, Urban Roots there in Tampa, Florida. Where's it at? Right off Dale Mabry. Okay. The suggested reading, and again, we have done this one before, but I felt like it was worth popping up again.
Especially for this episode.
It's a handy field guide. And again, it's a field guide not just about insects, but also has diseases, also has other cultural things that are in there. Hell, one of the things it talks about is, even deer and moles and, it's really trying to hit everything on a lot of different things. But I like that it's field guide style. As you can see, nicely sized.
It does fit in your back pocket.
It does fit right there in the back pocket. There is an updated version now, which I believe has a couple more, of what we know about as far as even.
It's nice too because it's got pictures
and things like that.
So
great pictures.
The pictures are definitely helpful.
And the problems are alphabetized, but it goes through pests, it goes through diseases, environmental stresses, nutrient deficiencies, and controls. The control stuff they actually talk. We talked a little bit about controls. We were only scratching the surface. This goes into a lot more detail about the variety of controls that you can do. A quick. And this is the first edition. There's a second edition. Maybe I said that, maybe not. But check it out. It's a good one. We don't have an outdoor report today. We are going to do a listener interaction. We are going to do, and I know the Grandpa is going to be putting out saying for listener questions, put it out there. It's a shout out to everybody. We're going to do a You Ask Us question. Put the question out there. If it's a good one, we'll pick it. If we pick your question, we will feature you as being the person that asked it. So throw some stuff out there, guys. We'd love to hear from you. Supporter shout outs, last but not least. I know you were just recently in Montana. You got a couple ones for us. So go ahead.
Yeah, I got some supporter shout outs.
You got some stuff?
First off, I do want to shout out Ryan Brown, who we will just call Ryan Brown as opposed to his other name. But I do want to thank the boys from one of our competitor nutrient companies for taking me.
Ryan's always been a
friend of the family, and you know, he was on the team, so he knows what's up. I also want to shout out the guys at Prescribed Burn. There are some good friends of mine, Dan and Katie. Dan actually helped build the dispensary.
Prescribed Burn, I like that name.
Yeah, it's a great name. Katie.
Cheers, guys.
But we actually, we set them up with some new millennium, so they're going to give it a shot and try some things out. And if you're ever in Missoula, Montana, check them out. They're the fam, and they got good flower, bro.
Nice. And you saw Boxer Rain up there as well, right? Did you go by?
Actually, it was Sunday. I wasn't able to go by. And,
well, still shout out to Boxer Rain, which is up there. Shout out to Boxer Rain.
Continued supporters.
And guys, send us your nug shots. Show us some nug shots. I want to start doing a section where we finish up every show with some listener nug shots. Show us your New Millennium Growed weed.
Show us your
DLI grown
easiest
weed.
way, just tag Jug Dealers.
Show the jugs your nugs.
Ooh.
Show the jugs your nugs.
Okay.
Hey.
Write that down. Write that down. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. This has been a lot of fun doing a couple of these entomology issues or episode issues, right? It's like we're writing a magazine or something. What the hell is that? Thanks for coming out, guys. This is all brought to you by 5/8 Distribution here from the Jug Den. Until next time, we will see you soon.
Peace.